The number 14 had been on the side of that bus for 9 years. Raymond Cole knew this because he had driven Route 14 for 9 years, 6 months, and 11 days. He knew the number, the way a person knows their own address, not because they have memorized it, but because it is simply true, simply part of the architecture of their days. He was 58 years old. He lived on Caldwell Street, 12 blocks from the depot where the 14 bus began each day. He drove himself to the depot in a 12-year-old hatchback that his wife Denise said should have been replaced 4 years ago, and that Raymond kept because it started every morning without complaint, and because he had decided that a vehicle that starts every morning without complaint has earned whatever loyalty you choose to give it. Denise worked at the county hospital. She was a medical records administrator. She had been at the hospital for 18 years. They had met at a church potluck dinner when Raymond was still driving the delivery truck, when Denise had a laugh that could be heard from 2 tables away, and Raymond had decided that a laugh like that was the most important feature a person could have. They had 2 daughters. The older one, Kezia, was 31 and lived in the Pacific Northwest and worked for a technology company. The younger one, Tanya, was 27 and was finishing a graduate degree in urban planning in the city, and took the 14 bus to campus 3 days a week, though she did not always get her father's route. When she did, she sat in the 3rd row and did not wave or announce herself in any way that would embarrass him, which he appreciated. He had been a transit driver for the city's Metropolitan Bus Authority for 22 years. Before that, he had driven a delivery truck for 8 years, which is to say he had been moving people and things from one place to another for 30 years, and had never once lost a passenger, never once failed to complete a route, never once received a formal complaint from the authority. He had a clean driving record that went back to his first license at 16. He had never had a moving violation. He had had 1 minor parking citation in 1994, a Tuesday morning in the warehouse district, and he had paid it that afternoon at the clerk's office, and that was the complete record of his encounters with the city's traffic enforcement apparatus. 30 years of driving, 1 parking citation, everything else clean. He thought about that record sometimes. He thought about the work it represented, not the absence of violations, which was simply the absence of accidents or poor judgment, but the presence of 30 years of correct decisions behind the wheel, small decisions, mostly the kind that add up over decades into the record of a man who does the work correctly every time. He had received commendations, 3 of them. 2 from supervisors who had noted his record of on-time completion and safe driving, the kind of commendations that get written into a file and read at annual reviews and acknowledged and then filed. He was proud of those commendations. He had earned them by doing the work correctly for 22 years. And he believed that doing the work correctly deserved acknowledgement when the acknowledgement came. The 3rd commendation was different. The 3rd was from a passenger named Grace Hutchins, who had written a letter to the authority saying that Raymond Cole had waited an extra 45 seconds at the Highland Avenue stop every Thursday morning for 3 months, because Grace Hutchins arrived at that stop at exactly 44 seconds past the scheduled departure, and Raymond Cole had seen her running and had waited. The letter said a bus driver who waits 45 seconds is a bus driver who understands that the schedule is for the people, not the other way around. The authority framed it and put it in the break room at the depot. Raymond had a photograph of it on his phone, not because he was vain about it. He had taken the photograph because Denise had asked what it looked like, and he had not known how to describe the framing exactly, so he had taken the picture and sent it to her. She had sent back a message that said, "That's you. That's exactly you." He had kept the photograph since. He thought about Grace Hutchins sometimes. Not often. He did not know her. He had seen her through the bus door and in the rearview mirror for 3 months, and then she had written the letter, and he had never seen her again, which meant she had changed her schedule, or her route, or her job. She existed to him as a name on a piece of paper in a frame in a break room. He thought somewhere in this city there is a woman named Grace Hutchins who knows what she saw on a Thursday morning and decided it deserved a letter. He thought I would like to thank her properly someday. He thought I probably never will. But she is out there, and the letter is in the frame, and the frame is on the wall, and that is something. He had taken the transit driver examination at 36 after his second daughter was born, and the delivery truck company had reduced hours, and he and Denise had done the arithmetic, and the arithmetic had produced an uncomfortable answer. The transit authority examination required a commercial driver's license, a clean driving record for 5 years, and a written assessment. He had passed all 3 in the same month. He had started the following spring on a bus route that ran through the warehouse district, which was not Route 14, but which was a route, and he had driven it with the same methodical attention he brought to everything he drove. He had been assigned Route 14 7 years into his tenure, and had asked to stay on it ever since. He drove the 14 on weekdays, the 7:10 morning run, and the 4:20 afternoon run. He had driven the same route for so long that he had watched the city change through the windshield businesses opening and closing buildings, going up where parking lots used to be. Trees that had been saplings when he started the route now large enough to cast real shade. He ate lunch at a diner 2 blocks from the midpoint of the route on his 22-minute break at 11:15 4 days out of 5. The 5th day, he ate in the bus. The diner was called The Meridian. He had been going there for 7 years. The woman at the counter knew his order. She never wrote it down. She brought it when she saw him through the window coming across the street. He was in the way that a route driver becomes part of the neighborhood, a fixture. Not invisible. Not celebrity either. The specific middle thing where people know your face and your schedule and your name if they have asked it, and where your presence on the corner at 7:08 is part of what the morning looks like and your absence would be noticed. He had passengers he recognized, not by name necessarily, though some he knew by name. By face, by stop, by the way a person moves when they are running late versus when they have time. He knew which stops filled fast on Mondays. He knew which stretches of the route ran slow in the rain. He knew where the pavement dipped on Mercer Avenue and how to ease the wheel to keep the ride smooth. He knew his route. On a Wednesday morning in October, he was 4 stops into the 7:10 run when Officer Darren Whitfield pulled alongside the bus at the corner of Mercer and Holbrook. It was 7:29. The bus was on schedule. Officer Whitfield was in a patrol car. He activated his lights. Raymond pulled to the curb. This was standard procedure. You pull to the curb when a police vehicle signals you. He had done it once before in 22 years, 2 years ago, when a patrol car had pulled him over to report that the bus had a brake light out. He had thanked the officer and reported the maintenance issue at the next depot check-in. He opened the front door. He set the parking brake. He turned on the hazard lights. He had 14 passengers. He stood from the driver's seat and moved to the door. Whitfield was at the bottom of the steps. He was young, 29, maybe 30. He had the specific posture of someone who conducts traffic stops regularly and has not yet developed the particular fatigue that long experience produces. He said, "I need you to step down, sir." Raymond said, "Can I ask what this is about?" Whitfield said, "I need you to step off the bus, sir." Raymond said, "I have 14 passengers. Can you tell me what the issue is so I can determine the appropriate procedure?" Whitfield said, "Sir, step off the bus." Raymond stepped down. He was conscious of the 14 passengers as he descended the steps. He had not said anything to them before stepping out. Protocol said, "Exit the vehicle when directed." Protocol did not say, "Explain to your passengers what is happening and why," because in 22 years he had never been in a situation where the reason was not apparent within the first 30 seconds. This was different. He stepped down, and he did not know the reason, and his passengers did not know the reason, and the lights on the patrol car were still going, and it was 7:29 on a Wednesday morning on Mercer Avenue. He was wearing his authority uniform. The navy jacket with the MBA logo on the chest. The navy trousers. His driver's ID was clipped to the jacket pocket where it was required to be at all times during a shift. Whitfield said, "License and registration." Raymond said, "I have my driver's ID and my commercial vehicle certification. The bus registration is in the vehicle. I can provide all of it. But I would like to know what this stop is about." Whitfield said, "There's been a report of erratic driving on this route. Raymond said, "I have been driving this route for 9 years. I have had no safety incidents. I have 3 commendations from the authority. I am currently 4 stops into the 7:10 run and I am on schedule. I would like to know the specifics of the report." Whitfield said, "I'll need your commercial license." Raymond reached into his jacket pocket. He removed his commercial driver's license. He held it out. Whitfield took it. He looked at it. He held it. He said, "I'm going to need you to remain here while I run this." Raymond said, "How long is that going to take?" Whitfield said, "As long as it takes." Raymond said, "I have 14 passengers. I am on a scheduled route. If I am delayed more than 5 minutes, I am required by authority protocol to radio the dispatcher and notify them of a route interruption." Whitfield said, "Then radio your dispatcher." Raymond said, "I am going to do that. But I also want to be clear that I have not committed any traffic violation that I am aware of, and I have no safety incidents on my record, and I am not sure what the basis for this stop is." Whitfield did not respond to that. He walked back to his patrol car. Raymond stood on the sidewalk. He looked at the bus. He could see the passengers through the windows. Most of them were looking back at him. Not all. Some had their phones out. Some were looking at the street ahead. One woman in the second row, a woman he recognized from the Holbrook Street stop, had turned completely sideways in her seat and was watching the sidewalk. He picked up his radio. He called the dispatcher. He said, "Cole on 14 on-time status interrupted. Police stop at Mercer and Holbrook. Cause unknown. Duration unknown." The dispatcher said, "Copy, Cole. Standing by." He stood on the sidewalk. He thought about the 14 passengers. He thought about the 7:10 schedule and the connection at the downtown transit hub where 3 of those passengers would transfer to the crosstown line, the next run of which was not for 22 minutes, which meant that a delay of more than 8 minutes here would cost 3 of his passengers their connection. He thought about the woman in the second row. She came aboard at Holbrook every Wednesday. She had a meeting bag and a travel cup, and she always sat in the second row, and she always got off at the government center stop. He did not know what she did at the government center. He knew she was always there on Wednesdays. He thought about what he had done wrong. He reviewed the last 4 stops in his memory with the precise attention of someone who has spent 30 years responsible for the safety of people in motion. He had made no improper turns. He had observed all signals. He had not exceeded the route speed limit at any point. He had come to a full stop at the Bay Street stop per protocol. He had opened and closed the doors correctly. He had done nothing wrong. He stood on the sidewalk. Whitfield was in the patrol car. The license plate reader was running. The radio was going. The lights on the patrol car were still going the way they go when a stop is active. He watched Whitfield in the patrol car. The interior light was on. He could see the shape of Whitfield through the windshield, the movement of hands that meant the radio was being used, the stillness that meant he was waiting for something to come back. He thought about what could come back. His commercial license was clean. His record was clean. The bus registration was current. The inspection certification was current. There was nothing to come back that was going to produce a citation. He thought then, what is the basis? What is the end point of this stop if there is nothing to find? He thought an anonymous call. Erratic driving. No dashcam footage mentioned. No witness present. A call from a phone that no one would trace from a person no one would identify about behavior that the bus's own cameras would not have recorded because he had not been driving erratically. He thought the end point is whenever Whitfield decides the end point is. That was a hard thought. He stood with it. He thought Denise would say something here. She would say it quietly and precisely, and it would be the right thing. She had a way of naming what was happening without making it worse by naming it. She had done it 40 times in 31 years together. He had never figured out how she knew which words were the right ones. He thought she had just decided at some point that the truth stated plainly was better than the truth undressed. He stood on the sidewalk. He held his radio. He waited. 4 minutes passed. A passenger got off the bus. It was not a scheduled stop. But the front door was open because Raymond had left it open per safety protocol when he exited, and a passenger had decided that waiting was no longer the plan. It was the man from the back of the bus, a tall man in a postal uniform who had boarded at the first stop with a soft-sided lunch bag and had settled into the last row. He stepped off. He looked at Raymond. He said, "I'm going to be late." Raymond said, "I'm sorry, I'm working to resolve this." The postal worker said, "It's not your fault." He walked down Mercer Avenue. A second passenger got off, then a third. Raymond watched them go. He thought 14 passengers, 12 now. He thought each of those 12 has somewhere they are going. Each of them chose this bus because this bus was going to get them there on time. He thought about Grace Hutchins. He thought about her letter. The schedule is for the people, not the other way around. He thought, I am doing the wrong thing by these people, and I do not know how to stop it because I am standing on a sidewalk being told to wait, and I am waiting. A woman came off the bus. It was the woman from the second row, the one with the meeting bag. She walked down the steps and stood beside Raymond on the sidewalk. She did not say anything. She stood beside him. She set her travel cup on the sidewalk between her feet. She crossed her arms. Raymond looked at her. She said, "I'm not going anywhere." He said, "You'll miss your connection at the hub." She said, "Then I'll miss it." He said, "You don't have to do this." She said, "I know I don't." Her name was Anita Marsden. She was 53. She had ridden Route 14 for 6 years since she transferred to the city planning office from a position in the county seat 14 miles away. The commute by car had been 40 minutes. The commute by the 14 bus had been 38 minutes, and it cost her nothing in the way of parking or fuel, and she could read on the bus, which she could not do in a car. So she had made the calculation and taken the bus and kept taking it. She had never introduced herself to Raymond Cole. She had said good morning on days when she had time to say good morning, and she had thanked him when she got off at the government center, because she thanked bus drivers as a general principle, having ridden transit for most of her adult life, and understanding in the way that regular transit riders understand that the driver is the reason the bus exists in any functional sense. She worked in the city planning office at the government center. She had been riding Route 14 for 6 years. She had never spoken more than 3 sentences to Raymond Cole in that time because she was on the bus to get somewhere, and he was on the bus to take her there, and that had been the complete arrangement. She stood beside him on the sidewalk. Whitfield was still in the patrol car. Another passenger came off the bus. It was a young man college age with a backpack. He stood on the sidewalk. He looked at the patrol car. He looked at Raymond. He stood. Then another, and another. They did not get together and confer. They did not organize. There was no signal or coordination that Raymond could see. They simply got off the bus one by one and stood. 8 passengers remained on the bus. 7. 6. The woman from the Holbrook stop was the last of the passengers still seated. She was an elderly woman, 70 or so, with a small rolling cart and a winter coat despite the mild October morning. She had boarded with difficulty, the cart catching on the step, and Raymond had held the door and waited for her. She sat in the accessible seating section. She looked at Raymond through the window. She looked at the passengers on the sidewalk. She stood up. She gathered her cart. She moved slowly to the door. Raymond went to the bottom of the steps to help with the cart. She stepped down. She stood beside the others, 14 passengers, outside the bus, standing on the sidewalk at the corner of Mercer and Holbrook on a Wednesday morning in October. Whitfield came out of the patrol car. He looked at the bus. He looked at the sidewalk. He said, "What is this?" Nobody answered him immediately. Anita Marsden said, "We're waiting for our driver." Whitfield said, "You need to get back on the bus." She said, "We will when he gets his license back and you explain what the stop was for." Whitfield said, "Ma'am, this is a law enforcement matter." She said, "And this is a public transit route, which is also a matter." Raymond said, "Officer, I understand that you have a job to do. I am cooperating with this stop. I have given you my license, and I have stood here, and I have waited. I am going to ask you one more time, what is the specific basis for this stop? Because I am on a schedule and my passengers have places to be, and 14 people are now standing on a sidewalk at 7:32 in the morning, and I do not know why." Whitfield looked at the 14 people on the sidewalk. He looked at his radio. He looked at Raymond's driver's license in his hand. He said there was a call, reported erratic driving on the 14. Raymond said, "From whom?" Whitfield said, "Anonymous." Raymond said, "An anonymous report of erratic driving with no other specification." Whitfield said, "That is correct." Raymond said, "I have driven this route for 9 years. I have 0 safety incidents. I have my commercial license, my authority certification, and my driver ID on my person. The bus has current registration and current inspection certification, both of which are documented in the vehicle. The specific claim is an anonymous report of erratic driving. There is no evidence of erratic driving. There is no dash cam footage that I am aware of. There is no witness that I am aware of. There is an anonymous call. He said, "I am asking you to return my license so that I can get 14 people to where they need to go." Whitfield looked at the license. He looked at the 14 people. He held the license out. Raymond took it. Whitfield said, "Drive safely." He got in the patrol car. He turned off the lights. He pulled away from the curb. Raymond looked at the 14 passengers on the sidewalk. He said, "I'm sorry about the delay." Nobody said anything for a moment. The elderly woman with the rolling cart said, "Don't apologize. You didn't do anything." One by one, they got back on the bus. Raymond was the last one up the steps. He set the parking brake. He turned off the hazards. He picked up the radio. He said, "Cole on 14, route resuming, 7:34. Dispatcher said, "Copy, Cole. Welcome back." He pulled away from the curb. He drove with the same attention he always drove with. Left hand on the wheel at the correct position. Eyes on the road but aware of the mirrors. Aware of the stops approaching. Aware of the passengers behind him who were settling back into the rhythm of transit. The particular collective exhale of a group of people who have been through something unexpected and are now resuming the thing they were doing before it happened. He thought they didn't have to come off that bus. He thought they were not required to. They were passengers on a bus that had pulled to the curb during a police stop. The protocol in that situation is, remain seated. Wait for the driver, the situation will resolve. That is the protocol. That is what 14 reasonable people would do if they were following the protocol. They did not follow the protocol. He thought about the sequence of it. The postal worker had been first, then the woman in the blue coat whom he recognized from the Elm Street stop. Then the student with the backpack. Then 3 more, then 2 more, then 3 more, then the elderly woman with the cart, each one making a separate decision, each decision landing in the same place. He thought, I don't know what they saw that made them decide. I know what was happening on the sidewalk. A black man in a transit uniform standing on the sidewalk, while a white officer ran his clean license through a system that was going to confirm what the license already said. I know that is what was happening. I don't know if that is what they saw, or if they saw something else, or if they just felt something and responded to the feeling. He thought whatever they saw or felt they came. He thought that is not a small thing. He thought it is not the thing I needed exactly because the thing I needed was not to be on that sidewalk in the first place. But it was something. It was 14 people deciding separately and all at once that they were not going to sit in the warmth of the bus while their driver stood in the October morning waiting for a license to come back clean. He thought I'm going to think about this for a long time. The bus was quiet for the first block. Then Anita Marsden from the second row said, "Does that happen to you often?" He kept his eyes on the road. He said sometimes. She said, "How do you do it?" He said, "I think about the route." She said the route. He said, "I think about where I am going and where the people on this bus are going. If I think about that, I can get through whatever is happening on the sidewalk." The route does not change because of what happens on the sidewalk. The stops are still there. The people at the stops are still waiting. The route is the same route it was before the stop happened. So, if I hold the route in my mind, I can stay oriented. He said I drove the delivery truck for 8 years before I came to the authority. I drove alone. Just me and the cargo. No passengers. And when something went wrong on the road, I handled it by myself. And there was nobody waiting for me. This work is different. This work has people in it. When something goes wrong, the people are in it too. That changes how you handle it. You handle it for them, not just for you. He said that's what I was doing on the sidewalk this morning, handling it for them, trying to resolve it as fast as I could so they could get where they were going. And they got off the bus anyway and stood beside me. I was trying to handle it for them and they were trying to handle it with me. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand that. She said that's a very specific way to think about it. He said 22 years you develop specific ways. She said, does it always work? He said mostly. There are days when it's harder. Today, it was harder than usual. Not because of what happened, because of the 14 people on the sidewalk. I keep thinking about them, and when I'm thinking about them, I'm not thinking about the route. She said, "What do you think about when you think about them?" He said, "I think about the fact that they didn't have to come off. They chose to. And I don't know what to do with something that someone chooses to do for you when you didn't ask." She said, "You don't have to do anything with it." He said, "That's what my wife said." She said, "Your wife is right." He said, "She usually is." She was quiet. He drove the next 2 stops. She said, "I got off because I was angry." He said, "At Whitfield." She said, "At the situation, at the whole thing, at the idea of sitting in that seat while you stood out there for no reason anyone could explain. I don't usually do things like that. I ride the bus. I go to work. I don't make scenes." He said, "That wasn't a scene." She said, "I know. But it felt like it might become one, and I decided I didn't care." He said, "I appreciate it for what it's worth." She said, "For what it's worth." They drove in silence for a stop. She said, "I'm going to be late for my 9 o'clock. He said, "I know. I'm sorry." She said, "It's not your fault." He said, "I know. I'm still sorry." She said, "The planning office runs late sometimes. It'll be fine." He nodded. He drove the route. He thought about the elderly woman with the cart. He had helped her off the bus at the corner of Mercer and Holbrook, and he had stood beside her on the sidewalk. At the end, when Whitfield drove away, and Raymond said, "I'm sorry for the delay," she had said, "Don't apologize. You didn't do anything." He thought about that sentence. "Don't apologize, you didn't do anything." He had heard versions of that sentence before. He had heard it in the way people say it when they are trying to be kind, as reassurance, as a way of releasing the other person from an obligation. He had heard it, and he had always appreciated it, and had always been a little unconvinced by it, because 22 years of navigating the world in the way he navigated it had given him a complicated relationship with the idea that being on the receiving end of something meant you had not done anything. But she had said it differently. She had said it with the authority of a person who had been in the world for 70 years, and had seen things and knew the difference between guilt and circumstance. He had done nothing wrong. That was her meaning. Not you didn't cause this, which was true. Not you handled it well, which he hoped was true. She meant you didn't do anything that deserved what happened on that sidewalk. The sidewalk was not a consequence of your actions. The sidewalk was an unjust imposition on a man who was doing his job. Don't apologize for a sidewalk that wasn't yours. He thought about that the whole way to the hub. He made up 4 minutes by the time they reached the downtown hub. He was not supposed to make up time. Protocol said, "Do not accelerate beyond the speed limit to compensate for a delay." He did not exceed the speed limit. He took the corners at the correct speed. He simply did not pause at empty stops, and he was ready for the light changes in a way that only 9 years of driving the same route produces. He delivered 11 of the 14 passengers to the hub in time for their connections. The other 3 had already walked away on Mercer Avenue. He did his afternoon run at 4:20. Then he went to the depot. He sat in the break room with a cup of coffee and wrote his incident report for the morning stop. He wrote it in the way the authority required: time, location, duration, officer identification, reason, given for stop outcome. He wrote it precisely and without commentary. He noted that the stop had lasted 6 minutes. He noted that 14 passengers had exited the vehicle voluntarily during the stop. He noted that the reason given was an anonymous report with no corroboration. He noted that his commercial license had been returned and the stop concluded without citation. He submitted the report. He drove home along Millbrook Road. He called Denise from the parking lot before he went in. She answered on the second ring. He told her what had happened. He was precise about it the way he was precise about incident reports because he had found that precision made it easier to say things that were difficult. If you named the times and the sequence, the rest of it had a container. He told her about the anonymous call. He told her about the 6 minutes. He told her about the license going into the patrol car. He told her about the 14 passengers and the postal worker who had walked, and Anita Marsden standing beside him on the sidewalk, and the elderly woman with the cart who had been last off and had said, "Don't apologize." Denise listened. She said, "How are you?" He said, "I'm all right." She said, "That's not what I asked." He said, "I'm okay." I'm more okay than I expected to be. I keep thinking about the 14 people on the sidewalk. She said, what about them? He said, I didn't ask them. I didn't say a word to them. They just came. She was quiet for a moment. She said, they see you. They've been seeing you for 9 years. You've been seeing them. That's what happened on the sidewalk. He said, I know. I just don't know what to do with it. She said, you don't have to do anything with it. Come inside. I made dinner. He went inside. The authority's operations supervisor received the report the following morning. His name was Frank Adeyemi. He had been with the authority for 31 years, the last 12 in operations. He read Raymond's report twice. He noted the 6-minute duration. He noted the anonymous report basis. He noted the 14 passengers. He called the Transit Authority's Legal and Compliance Office. He called the city's liaison officer for transit operations. He called Raymond Cole. Frank said, I read your report. Raymond said yes. Frank said 6 minutes. Anonymous call. No citation, no prior incidents on your record. Raymond said, that's correct. Frank said, and 14 passengers got off the bus. Raymond said, yes, they got off on their own. I didn't ask them to. I don't know why they did. Frank said, I think I know why they did. Raymond said, I thought about that on the drive back. I don't know what to do with it. Frank said, you don't have to do anything with it. They did something. You stayed on the sidewalk and kept your composure and came back and finished the route and filed a report. That's what you had to do. They did the rest. Raymond said one of them missed her connection, and 3 walked. I keep thinking about those 3. Frank said the 3 who walked chose to walk. That was their decision. You couldn't control it. Raymond said no, but it still sits with me. Frank said, I know. That's because you understand that the route is for people. He paused. He said, I'm referring this to the oversight office. I want the stop documented. I want the anonymous call reviewed if there's a way to trace it, and I want this on record. Raymond said, all right. Frank said you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Raymond said, I know, thank you. He hung up. He sat in the break room with the cold coffee. He thought about the 14 passengers on the sidewalk. He thought about the postal worker who had said, it's not your fault, and then walked. He thought about Anita Marsden who had said, I'm not going anywhere, and then stood. He thought about the elderly woman with the cart who had been last off and first to say, don't apologize. He thought about the way they had gotten off one by one without conferring, without a signal. Each one making a private decision that happened to be the same decision as every other person on that bus. He did not know what to call that. He thought 14 people on a sidewalk at 7:32 in the morning. 14 people who had somewhere to be and decided that standing beside him was where they were going to be first. He thought about Grace Hutchins. He thought about her letter in the break room. He thought the schedule is for the people, not the other way around. He thought they understood that. They understood it without me saying anything. He thought Grace Hutchins wrote a letter about 45 seconds. I do not know what the 14 passengers on the sidewalk are going to do. I do not know if they are going to do anything. I do not need them to do anything. They already did the thing. They got off the bus and they stood. He thought maybe that is the whole thing. Maybe getting off the bus and standing is the complete action and everything after it is just the world adjusting to what happened. He thought about Denise. He thought 31 years. She has been beside me in the hard moments for 31 years. Not always physically. Sometimes across town at the hospital. Sometimes by phone. Sometimes just the knowledge that she was there, that when he got home there would be a person who knew what had happened and could hold it with him, make it smaller by being in the room with it. He thought, I'm going to call her when I get to the depot. I'm going to tell her what happened today on the afternoon run and about Anita Marsden and the 14 people on the sidewalk and about the Grace Hutchins letter. And she is going to say something that puts the whole thing into the right shape. She always does. 31 years, and she has never once failed to find the shape of a thing. He thought that is its own kind of driving. Knowing where you're going, keeping everyone in the vehicle, not stopping when the road gets hard. He thought she has done it for 31 years. He thought I am the luckiest man on the 14. He drove. He thought the schedule is for the people, not the other way around. He thought they understood that. They understood it without me saying anything. Frank Adeyemi called the city's liaison office and then he called the Transit Authority Board's Accountability Committee, and then he went down the hall to the Legal and Compliance office and had a 15-minute conversation that resulted in an email to the police department's Professional Standards Division. The email said on October 14th, driver Raymond Cole, 9-year veteran of the authority with 0 safety incidents and 3 commendations, was pulled from an active route by Officer Darren Whitfield. The stop lasted 6 minutes. The reason given was an anonymous report of erratic driving. Available video footage does not support the report. No citation was issued. The authority is formally requesting a review of the basis for the stop and the protocol under which anonymous, uncorroborated reports are used to initiate commercial vehicle pulls during active transit routes. The email also said 14 passengers exited the vehicle during the stop. We note this not as a legal matter, but as a record of the human cost of the stop. 14 people with schedules and obligations stood on a sidewalk for 6 minutes because an anonymous phone call was treated as sufficient basis to pull a commercial vehicle from service. The Oversight Office reviewed the incident over 3 weeks. The investigator assigned was a woman named Clara Vega. She pulled the patrol car's dash cam footage. She pulled the dispatch radio logs for the anonymous call. She pulled Raymond's 9-year driving record. She reviewed the authority's incident report and Frank Adeyemi's referral. The dash cam footage showed Raymond's bus traveling within the posted speed limit at all points visible on camera. No erratic driving was visible. No traffic violations were visible. The dispatch radio logs showed that the anonymous call had been placed from a prepaid phone. The call had reported, quote, a bus driving all over the road on Mercer Avenue. The dispatch operator had noted it and forwarded it to the nearest patrol unit, which was Whitfield. Clara Vega wrote in her notes the report described behavior inconsistent with all available footage. The driver's record contains 0 safety incidents over 9 years. The decision to conduct a stop based solely on an anonymous, unverified report with no corroborating evidence, and to detain the driver for 6 minutes while 14 passengers were on board is not supported by the record. She wrote a formal recommendation that the police department review its protocol for anonymous transit complaints, specifically the threshold of evidence required before pulling a commercial vehicle from service during an active route. She wrote a second recommendation that the authority develop a formal protocol for driver support during unexplained stops, including the right of the driver to know the specific basis for the stop and the expected duration before the commercial vehicle can resume service. She wrote a third recommendation that the police department add to its training materials for patrol officers a specific module on commercial vehicle stops, including the distinction between a personal vehicle stop and a commercial vehicle stop in which the vehicle is in active service carrying passengers. The module would specify that an anonymous, uncorroborated report is not on its own sufficient basis for a commercial vehicle pull from active service, and that the threshold for such a pull must include at minimum one of the following dash cam footage: a witness statement or a direct observation by the responding officer of the reported behavior. She noted in her summary that Officer Whitfield had observed no erratic driving himself. He had received an anonymous call. He had acted on the call without corroboration. The record did not support the stop. She noted in her summary that she was not making a finding of malicious intent. She was making a finding of insufficient basis. The distinction mattered to the record. It was not the same finding and should not be treated as such. But the outcome, a 9-year veteran driver with a clean record removed from an active route for 6 minutes on the basis of an anonymous call, was the outcome regardless of intent. The police department received the recommendations in writing. The Transit Authority adopted its own protocol revision within 6 weeks. The protocol revision specified that in the event of a stop with a duration exceeding 5 minutes, the authority's operations supervisor would be notified in real time, and the dispatcher would maintain open radio contact with the driver. It specified that drivers have the right to request a supervisor's presence at the stop location if the duration exceeded 10 minutes, or if a reason for the stop had not been communicated after the first 5 minutes. It specified in the last section that the operating principle of the Transit Authority was that drivers and passengers are in a shared endeavor, that the route exists for both, and that the integrity of the route requires the protection of both. Frank Adeyemi read that section 3 times. He thought about Raymond Cole driving 22 years and having a record that read 0 safety incidents and 3 commendations and 1 6-minute sidewalk on a Wednesday morning in October that should not have existed but did. He thought about what it cost to keep a record like Raymond's, not the driving. The driving was the work, and Raymond was good at the work, and the work was its own reward in the way that mastery is its own reward. He thought about the other thing, the thing that did not appear in incident reports or commendation letters, the thing you maintained over 22 years of doing a public-facing job as a black man in a city that looked at you differently depending on whether you were in the driver's seat or standing on the sidewalk. He thought about the composure, the way Raymond had described the stop in his incident report, precise and without commentary. The way you write when you are making sure the record is clean and accurate and gives no one anything to use against you. He had read 100 incident reports in 31 years. He recognized the writing of someone who is careful because they have to be. He put the new protocol section on the bulletin board in the break room beside the framed letter from Grace Hutchins. The week after Clara Vega submitted her report, Whitfield received a formal letter from his supervisor. The letter described the findings of the review. It noted that the stop had been initiated without sufficient corroboration of the reported behavior. It noted that the driver's record contained 0 safety incidents and that the available footage was inconsistent with the reported erratic driving. It noted that the decision to keep the commercial vehicle off service for 6 minutes while 14 passengers waited was not proportional to the basis for the stop. The letter recommended mandatory retraining on commercial vehicle protocols and placed a note of concern in Whitfield's file. Whitfield submitted a written response. The response said that he had acted in good faith on a reported safety concern and that he had returned the license once the verification was complete. He said he had not intended any harm. The supervisor acknowledged the response and added it to the file. Clara Vega read both documents. She made a note in her own file. The note said intent acknowledged, insufficiency of basis unaddressed in response. The record stands. The record stood. The Transit Authority published its revised protocol for commercial vehicle stops in a brief posted to the driver bulletin board system. The brief was 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph described the new threshold for third-party route interruption notification. The second paragraph described the driver's rights during an unexplained stop. The third paragraph described the operating principle. Raymond read it on the bulletin board at the depot. He read the third paragraph twice. He thought it was the right paragraph. He thought it took a sidewalk and 6 minutes and 14 passengers and a 3-week investigation to produce 3 paragraphs. He thought that is how the institution works. It is slow and it is expensive and the cost is paid by the person standing on the sidewalk. But the paragraphs exist now. They will be here for the next driver. He thought that is something. Raymond drove the 7:10 run the following Wednesday. He pulled away from the depot at 7:04. He made the first stop at 7:08. At the Holbrook stop, Anita Marsden got on. She took the second row. She had her meeting bag and her travel cup. She said nothing at first. At the Bay Street stop, Raymond waited for an older gentleman with a cane who was approaching from a third of a block away. He waited 14 seconds. The gentleman boarded. He thanked Raymond. Raymond said no problem. Take your time. At the next stop, Anita Marsden said from the second row, "You still do that." He said, "Do what?" She said, "Wait." He said, "When I can, yes." She said, "The schedule is for the people." He looked at her in the rearview mirror for a second. He said, "That's right." She said, "I read that. On the bulletin board at the transit center, there was a letter from a passenger." He said, "Grace Hutchins." She said, "You know her." He said, "I know her name. I don't know her personally. She wrote the letter 8 years ago." Anita said, "Did you know she wrote it?" He said, "Not until after. The authority told me. They asked if I minded them posting it." She said, "What did you say?" He said, "I said I was grateful for it, but that I would have waited for anyone running late, not just her." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "Last week I made my 9 o'clock. He said, "I'm glad." She said, "By 2 minutes." He said, "I made up some time." She said, "I noticed." He drove the route. He thought, as he often thought on this stretch of Mercer Avenue about the morning 3 weeks ago. He thought about the corner at Holbrook. He thought about the patrol car's lights. He thought about standing on the sidewalk while the license went into the patrol car and the radio crackled, and the minutes passed. He thought about the sound of the bus door opening. He had not asked anyone to get off. He had not said a word to the passengers after he stepped down. He had simply stood on the sidewalk and the door had opened and they had come, one by one, each one making a choice. He thought about what it meant to drive the same route for 9 years, and to know the people on that route the way he knew them, not by their names, but by their stops and their schedules and the particular way each person waited at the curb. He thought about what it meant to be known back to be the driver that a person trusts without articulating that they trust him. The driver that 14 people chose to stand beside on a sidewalk on a Wednesday morning when they could have stayed in their seats and waited in the warmth. He thought I did not ask for that. He thought I would not have asked for it. He thought they gave it anyway. He made the Bay Street stop. The older gentleman with the cane had a companion this Wednesday, a younger man who helped him board. Raymond waited. He held the door. He said, "Take your time." He made the hospital stop. 3 passengers boarded. A woman with a small child in a carrier. A man in scrubs. A woman who Raymond recognized from years of this stop. The woman who came every Wednesday and always sat alone and always got off at the university stop and always had a different book. He said good morning to each of them as they boarded. They said good morning back. He drove the route. He thought, this is the work. This is what 22 years looks like on a given Wednesday. The Bay Street stop and the hospital stop and the woman with the book and the man in the scrubs and the route going where the route goes. He thought the 6 minutes happened. The 6 minutes are in the record now. Clara Vega's report is in the record. The email from the authority is in the record. The protocol revision will be in the record when it is finished. The anonymous call is in the record, and the dash cam footage is in the record. And the fact that the footage showed nothing wrong is in the record. He thought the record is what remains, not the sidewalk, not the 6 minutes. The record of what happened and what was found and what was changed because of what was found. He drove. He pulled into the downtown transit hub at 7:53. On time. 14 passengers. All aboard. He opened the doors. He said, "Thank you all. Have a good morning." They filed out. Anita Marsden was last. She said, "See you Thursday." He said, "I'll be here." She paused at the door. She said, "Do you know why I've been riding this bus for 6 years?" He said, "It's a good route." She said, "It's you. Not just the route. You. You wait when people are running. You say good morning to everyone who gets on. You called the woman in the accessible seat Miss the first time I heard you do it. You know where you're going, and you know who's on the bus, and you make them feel like they're supposed to be there. That's not nothing. That's actually a fairly hard thing to do every day for 9 years." He said, "I don't think about it that way." She said, "I know. That's probably why you do it right." She said one more thing before she went. She said, "I told my supervisor what happened last Wednesday. I told her why I was late." She said, "What did you do?" I said, "I got off the bus and stood next to the driver." She said, "Good." He looked at her. She said, "I thought you should know someone said good about it." She went. He cleaned the bus. He did this at every hub stop. He walked the aisle. He collected what passengers left. He made sure the accessible seating was clear. He checked the mirrors. He did a walk-around of the exterior, the same walk-around he did every morning before the first run, the same sequence his eyes had run for 9 years. Front left, front right, rear, left, rear, right, tires, lights, everything in order. He got back in the driver's seat. He thought about Tanya, his younger daughter. He thought about the fact that she sometimes rode this bus. He thought about the fact that she had not been on the bus this morning, which he knew because he would have seen her third row, no announcement of herself. He thought about what she would have thought if she had been on the bus and had seen him step off onto the sidewalk. He thought she would have come off the bus. She would have been the first one off. She would have stood beside him, and she would not have said anything, and she would not have needed to. He thought, "I am glad she was not on the bus." He thought, "I am also glad that the people who were on the bus were on the bus." He sat for the 12 minutes before the reverse run began. He looked at Mercer Avenue through the windshield. The city moving, people going places. The morning making itself in the particular way that October mornings make themselves in this city, the light at a lower angle than August, the air with the first real edge in it, the trees on the side of the avenue at the beginning of their change. He thought about the 14 passengers on the sidewalk. He thought about each one of them now separately, the way he thought about each stop on his route separately. The postal worker who had been first and had walked. He hoped the postal worker had made his shift. He thought the postal worker probably had. He thought about the woman in the blue coat. He did not know her name. He hoped she had gotten where she was going. He thought about the student with the backpack. He thought that student is going to think about that sidewalk for a long time. It is the kind of morning that stays. He thought about the elderly woman with the cart. He thought she got off last and she stood first in terms of saying what needed to be said, which was, "Don't apologize." He thought she had been around long enough to know what deserved an apology and what didn't, and she wasn't going to let him apologize for something he hadn't done. He thought about Anita Marsden, second row, 6 years of the 14. She had said, "I got off because I was angry." He thought that is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a long time. Not because it was unusual for someone to be angry in a situation like that. Because she had said it plainly without dressing it up, without making it about anything other than what it was. She was angry. She got off the bus. That was what happened. He thought, "I am grateful for her anger." He thought about 30 years of moving people from one place to another. He thought the delivery truck had been solitary work. You picked up at one location and you delivered to another, and the transaction was between you and the freight. Nobody depended on your presence. Nobody waited for you at the stop. Nobody looked out the window at you and decided to get off and stand beside you on the sidewalk. The bus was different. The bus was 30 years of freight that breathed. The bus was a woman with a meeting bag and an older man with a cane, and a student with a novel and a postal worker with a lunch bag and 14 people on a Wednesday morning who were all going somewhere they needed to be. The bus was every person who had ever waited at the curb at 7:08 on Mercer Avenue and gotten on because they trusted that Raymond Cole would take them where the route said he would take them. He thought that is a thing worth doing. Moving people. Not the abstract moving. The specific moving. The woman with the book to the university stop. The man in the scrubs to the hospital stop. The postal worker to wherever the postal worker was going before he decided to walk instead, and Raymond hoped the postal worker made his shift. He truly did. He thought 30 years and the work is still the same work. Get them there. Don't leave anyone. Wait when someone is running. He thought this is the work. You go where the route goes. You wait when someone is running. You stay on the sidewalk when you have to, and you get back on the bus when you can, and you drive. You drive the whole route. You do not leave anyone. He thought about Anita Marsden's supervisor. He thought about the woman in the city planning office who had heard that her employee was late because she had gotten off a bus to stand next to a bus driver on a sidewalk and had said, "Good." He thought that is the whole chain. The elderly woman who said, "Don't apologize." Anita Marsden who said, "I got off because I was angry." The postal worker who walked. The student who stood. The supervisor who said, "Good." Frank Adeyemi who wrote the email. Clara Vega who built the record. The 3 paragraphs on the bulletin board. He thought each of those things is a link. Each one a decision someone made. The elderly woman with the cart deciding that "don't apologize" was the right sentence. Anita Marsden deciding she was angry enough to get off the bus. The postal worker deciding to walk and then deciding to say it's not your fault before he went. Frank deciding to write the email. Clara deciding the record needed a 3rd recommendation. The supervisor in the planning office deciding that "good" was the right word. He thought none of those people coordinated. None of them planned it. They each just decided in their own time what the right thing was and did it. And the sum of all those right things was a bulletin board at the depot with 3 new paragraphs on it. He thought that is how the world gets better. Not in one move. In 14 separate decisions, each one made alone, each one landing in the same direction. He thought each of those things is a link, and the chain is stronger than any single link, and the chain runs from a Wednesday morning on Mercer Avenue all the way to the bulletin board at the depot, all the way to the next driver who stands on the next sidewalk and has the 3 paragraphs to stand on. He thought I didn't make the chain. I was just standing on the corner of Mercer and Holbrook. He thought sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just standing is the start of the chain. He pulled onto the route. He drove. Subscribe our channel. We tell the stories of the drivers who do not leave anyone. They are here.